I remember exactly what I was doing when the call came. I was sitting on my couch, curled up in a hoodie that smelled faintly of antiseptic from my last hospital visit. There was a half-eaten microwave burrito on the coffee table and a movie playing on mute. I hadn't showered in 2 days. I didn't have the energy. When your kidneys are failing, your life narrows into a fog of doctor's appointments, blood tests, and quietly managing your fear. I had stage 5 renal failure. My doctor said dialysis was weeks away, maybe days. I was 29 and felt 90. My skin was pale, my face sunken, and every breath felt like it cost more than it gave. So when the phone rang at 11:42 p.m. and the screen flashed unknown, I almost didn't pick up. I figured it was a spam call or some late-night survey. But something, I don't know what, made me reach for it. "Mr. Carter," the voice on the other end said. It was calm but urgent. "This is Lillian from the Transplant Coordination Center. We have a viable donor kidney match for you. Are you available to come to the hospital immediately?" I sat up so fast the room spun. I couldn't speak. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. I asked her to repeat it, and she did. Slowly, carefully. Every word felt like it was opening a door I thought had already been locked forever. "A kidney? For me?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'm available. I can be there in 20 minutes. Less." I don't remember much about the drive. I just remember speeding through the empty streets, barely stopping at red lights, whispering thank you to no one. I wasn't even religious, but I prayed. I think anyone would. At the hospital, everything moved fast. I signed some forms I didn't read. I had blood drawn again. They prepped me for surgery while telling me that the organ was from a recently deceased donor, healthy, compatible, rare blood type match. "You're very lucky," one nurse said, her eyes kind behind the mask. It didn't feel like luck. It felt surreal, like I was dreaming on the edge of death and my brain was trying to comfort me with a fantasy. But when they wheeled me into pre-op and asked me to count backwards, the fear hit. What if I didn't wake up? What if my body rejected the kidney? What if this was some cruel error and they'd realize it too late? I blinked. The world tilted. Then darkness. When I woke up, I was groggy and cold and confused. There was a dull ache in my side and something in my veins made me feel like I was floating. A nurse noticed me stirring. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," she said. "The transplant was successful." That was the first time I cried in years. And I didn't even know why yet. Recovery was slower than I expected, but every moment felt like it was borrowed from something better. The first 2 days passed in a haze of 4 drips, hourly checks, and a kind nurse named Donna who had the softest voice I'd ever heard. She called me kiddo, which would have annoyed me under different circumstances, but right then it felt like someone had wrapped me in a warm blanket and said, "It's okay. You're still here." They said my body was responding well. No signs of rejection. Lab numbers were stable. They smiled when they read the chart. My mom showed up the second night, eyes red from crying, hugging me so tightly I thought she'd rip out the 4. I let her. I couldn't stop touching her arm, like if I didn't hold onto someone I'd drift away again. But as my body healed, my mind began to wrestle with what had just happened. I kept staring at the ceiling tiles, wondering about the person whose kidney was now inside me. They said deceased donor, but that was it. No name, no age, no cause of death. That's how it works. You don't get to know. Maybe that's for the best. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Still, it nagged at me. Someone died and I lived. That equation felt unbalanced, unfair. I had a second chance because someone else didn't get theirs. The third day, I was able to sit up on my own. Donna helped me shuffle over to the window with my 4 cart. I watched the sun rise over the parking structure. It was ugly, but it was real. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost waiting to fade out. "You're lucky," Donna said, checking my blood pressure. "Not everyone makes it to this point. Organs are scarce, especially for your blood type. You got a miracle, Mr. Carter." I smiled, but the word miracle clanged around in my head like something hollow. I wasn't sure if I believed in miracles. Randomness, maybe. Coincidence. Or just an accident where the math worked in my favor. The doctors kept using the word match. Compatible. Right size, right blood, right immune markers. But I started to wonder, what if it wasn't right? What if it was almost right? At night, I'd lie awake in the dark hospital room, listening to the soft beeping of machines, the distant clicks of nurses' shoes on tile. I tried to be grateful. I was. But under the gratitude was something harder, darker. A creeping thought I couldn't shake. What if I wasn't supposed to get that kidney? What if someone else was? I didn't say anything. Not to my mom. not to the doctors. But the silence felt heavier with every passing hour. And it wouldn't stay quiet for long. On the 5th night, I couldn't sleep. Something about the way the air felt, too still, too expectant, kept me awake. The morphine drip had been lowered that day, so I was more aware, more present. I was also more restless. I flipped through the channels on the small hospital TV, muted the news, and tried counting the dots in the ceiling tile above my bed. It didn't help. At around 3 a.m. I heard voices outside my door. Not loud, but urgent in the way people get when they think no one's listening. A nurse and someone else, maybe a doctor, I couldn't tell, were talking in hushed tones. He was prepped too fast. They barely double-checked the ID. Well, it's done now. You can't unsew him. Still, the charts didn't match until after he was already under. I flagged it. I don't know if anyone saw. Footsteps. Silence. I froze, staring at the door, heart thudding in my chest. Were they talking about me? Was that even possible? I waited a full minute before pressing the call button. When Donna came in, I asked for more water. I wanted to see her face, her eyes. She looked tired, but not panicked. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I imagined it. But the next day, things shifted. Doctors who had been friendly were now careful. Not cold, but deliberate. They stuck to their scripts. Smiled tight-lipped. One of them, a guy I hadn't seen before, came in, checked my chart without saying much, and walked out without meeting my eyes. Another nurse removed a name tag from my door and replaced it with a newer one. I asked her why, and she shrugged. Just updating records, she said, avoiding eye contact. The feeling that something wasn't right started burrowing under my skin. I knew hospitals were chaotic places. Mistakes happened. But the idea of a mistake during something as critical as a transplant, that wasn't just paperwork. That was life and death. I thought about what the nurse said in the hallway. They barely double-checked the ID. What if that meant I wasn't the intended recipient? That idea stayed with me the rest of the day. I started replaying the call from the transplant coordinator. The rush. The urgency. The lack of detail. We have a match, she'd said. Not your name came up. Just we have a match. That night, I couldn't eat. I stared at the dinner tray, rubbery chicken, mashed potatoes like glue, and pushed it aside. I stared at the 4 in my arm, the bandages across my abdomen, and wondered what, exactly, had been done to me. Or for me. I needed answers. But I didn't know who to ask. And even worse, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Because deep down, in that part of me that still believed in fairness, I could feel it. This kidney wasn't meant for me. The knock came just after lunch. I was half watching a rerun of some home renovation show, mine somewhere else entirely, when a soft rap on the door pulled me back. Come in, I called, my voice scratchy. The door creaked open, and a woman stepped inside. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her dark hair was hastily tied back, eyes swollen from crying, clothes thrown on without thought. She wasn't carrying flowers or a gift bag like other visitors. Just a black handbag clutched tightly to her chest like it was holding her together. Hi, she said, her voice trembling. I'm looking for Mr. Levin. Jacob Levin. Is this his room? I blinked. No, I'm Carter. Liam Carter. She looked confused, then glanced behind her like someone might clarify for her. But the hallway was empty. Are you sure? She asked. They told me room 517. This is 517, I said slowly, shifting upright in bed. But I don't know a Jacob Levin. She stared at me for a few seconds like she was trying to see through me, and then her face collapsed. Her shoulders hunched and she let out a breath that was more like a sob. I'm sorry, she whispered. I must have misunderstood. Before I could say another word, a nurse appeared behind her. Not Donna, someone I hadn't seen before. Young, nervous-looking. She touched the woman gently on the shoulder. Mrs. Levin, the nurse said, could I speak with you for a moment? In private. The woman didn't resist. She just followed the nurse into the hallway, the door shutting softly behind them. I sat there, suddenly cold. My mind raced. Levin. That name, it triggered something. I couldn't quite place it, but it felt tangled with the conversation I'd overheard the other night. With the unease in the doctor's eyes. With the way everyone was acting like they were stepping around a broken bone. Mrs. Levin. So that was his wife. Or widow? I pushed the call button. When a different nurse arrived, I asked, was there another patient assigned to this room before me? She gave me a practiced smile. Why do you ask? There was a woman here just now, looking for someone named Jacob Levin. She said this was his room. The nurse's smile didn't change, but something in her posture did. Sometimes room numbers get mixed up in the system, she said. I wouldn't worry about it. She didn't answer my question. She left before I could press further. I sat in silence, staring at the beige wall across from me, my stomach churning. That name, Levin, was more than a mistake. It was a thread, and someone was trying very hard to keep me from pulling it. But I wasn't going to stop, because if this kidney wasn't meant for me, then it had to be his. They discharged me 4 days later. It was supposed to feel like freedom, like stepping out into a new beginning with a second chance sewn inside me. But instead, I felt like I was walking off a cliff, blindfolded. The car ride home was silent. My mom kept glancing at me from the driver's seat, her lips pressed into a line. I think she could feel something was off, even if I hadn't said a word. I waited until I was alone in my apartment to open the discharge packet. It was a thick folder, prescriptions, dietary recommendations, follow-up appointments. I flipped through it on autopilot until I hit a page that made my breath catch. It was a post-op transplant summary, routine, probably something 100 patients had received before me. But the name at the top wasn't mine. Jacob Levin. Patient ID, different from mine. Blood type, same as mine. Surgery date, the night I was wheeled in. I stared at the page so long I forgot to blink. My heart started pounding. My hands shook. There was no way this was a clerical error. This was someone else's medical record buried in my paperwork. The same name the woman had asked for. The same name I'd overheard the nurses whisper. The same name I hadn't been able to forget. I flipped to the back of the packet and found a second set of forms. This time with my name on them. Same surgery notes. Same date. But now I saw the subtle differences. My official documentation had been printed more recently. Different timestamps. A couple of pages missing. Someone had swapped them. Or tried to. I felt sick. I stared at the wall for a long time, holding both pages side by side, trying to make the math make sense. Maybe there had been 2 transplants scheduled that night. Maybe one had been canceled. Maybe they had prepared for Mr. Levin but realized too late that I was the one who showed up. Or maybe they never realized at all. I opened my laptop and searched the name. Jacob Levin. It didn't take long. The first result was an obituary, local news, small write-up. Jacob Elias Levin, 41, passed away at County General Hospital following complications from kidney failure. He is survived by his wife and daughter. Died the same night I lived. I slammed the laptop shut like it could undo what I just read. My chest was tight. My mind was spinning. I wanted to believe it was all some horrible mix-up. A shared room number. A typo. An accident. But the truth was staring at me in black ink and grieving eyes. The kidney inside me, it wasn't just someone else's. It was someone else's last hope. And I had taken it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, the same one I'd nearly died on a week ago, staring at that obituary and the mismatched documents until the sun started creeping over the horizon. My body was healing, yes. But my mind was unraveling. I couldn't stop thinking about Jacob Levin. About how his name ended up in my paperwork. About how his wife stood in my doorway looking for him. How she cried when she realized he wasn't here and never would be. I needed answers. The first thing I did was call the transplant coordinator who had originally phoned me. Lillian. Her name had stuck with me. The number routed me through layers of automated menus before a receptionist picked up. When I asked for Lillian, there was a pause. Then a quiet shuffle of papers. I'm sorry, but she's not with us anymore, the receptionist said. She resigned last week. Last week? But she called me the night of my surgery. Another pause. Then, yes, well, it was a sudden departure. She transferred me to someone else, a replacement coordinator named Bryce. He sounded young, enthusiastic, like someone reading from a guidebook of empathy. Mr. Carter. So glad to hear you're recovering well, he said. What can I help you with today? I didn't dance around it. I found someone else's medical paperwork in my discharge packet. His name was Jacob Levin. He died the night of my transplant. I want to know if there was a mix-up. There was a long silence. Bryce's friendly tone faltered. Mr. Carter, I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation. These documents go through a lot of hands. I also found Mr. Levin's obituary, I said. Same night, same hospital. And a woman came to my room looking for him. Right, he said cautiously. But I want to reassure you that every organ allocation follows strict protocols. Blood typing, cross-matching, multiple verifications. The process is extremely thorough. I almost laughed. Then how did I end up with someone else's chart? Errors do happen, he replied, now fully corporate. But rest assured, your transplant was legally authorized and properly executed. I asked for copies of the pre-op compatibility results. He hesitated. That would require a formal request through medical records. HIPAA restrictions, you understand. But I'll make a note and escalate it internally. He thanked me for calling. Then he hung up. The next morning, I received a package via courier. No return address. Inside was a new set of documents. Freshly printed, neatly collated. All bearing my name. No mention of Jacob Levin. No mismatched IDs. No timestamp discrepancies. Just a glossy brochure on embracing your new life. They were scrubbing the trail. Hard. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up. I tried to tell my mom. I really did. She came over with a casserole. Some recipe from a Pinterest board she never uses but thought I'd like. It was cheesy, heavy, and exactly the kind of thing you shouldn't feed a post-transplant patient. But I ate it anyway, partly out of guilt, mostly to delay the conversation. We sat in my living room, sunlight slanting through the blinds, and I kept looking at her hands. They were smaller than I remembered, more wrinkled, with chipped nail polish she hadn't bothered to fix. I wondered how many nights she'd cried while I was in that hospital bed. I owed her the truth. Mom, I started, forcing the words up my throat. What if I told you? I think I wasn't supposed to get the transplant. She blinked at me, fork paused halfway to her mouth. What do you mean? I think the kidney, they gave it to the wrong person. There was a mix-up. A guy named Jacob Levin, he was supposed to get it, and he died. She set the fork down slowly. Why would you say something like that? Because I found his name in my discharge paperwork. Because a woman came to my room looking for him. Because I looked him up, and he died that same night. She stared at me, and for a second I saw it, doubt flickering behind her eyes. But then it hardened into denial. No, she said, shaking her head. No, don't do this to yourself. Mom, you got that call. You went to the hospital. They did the surgery. You were next in line, Liam. It was your turn. Why would they give a kidney to the wrong person? That doesn't happen. I think it did. She stood up, suddenly angry. You think you'd be sitting here alive if they hadn't double-checked everything? You think they just flipped a coin? I don't know what I think anymore. You're alive, she said, her voice cracking. That's what matters. I didn't push further. Couldn't. I watched her gather the empty dishes and head to the sink like that conversation had never happened. Like she could scrub it out of her memory the same way she washed a plate. And maybe she could. But I couldn't. Later that night, I called my best friend, Nate. Told him I needed to talk. But when he picked up and asked what was wrong, I couldn't say it. The words caught in my throat like splinters. I hung up before answering. How do you tell someone that you might be alive because another man died waiting? Worse, how do you say you think the hospital knew and just let it happen? The truth was becoming a lead weight in my chest. But every time I tried to share it, I choked. People didn't want to hear it. They wanted happy endings, not the jagged pieces behind them. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I kept it to myself. And it started to eat me alive. It started with the dreams. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, chest tight, heart pounding like I was running from something I couldn't see. In the dreams, I was back in the hospital bed. But it wasn't my room anymore. It was darker, colder. The monitors didn't beep. The walls were closing in. And someone stood at the foot of the bed, blurry and still, just watching. No face, no words. But I knew it was him, Jacob Levin. I started seeing him in waking life, too. Ghosts of him in crowds, glimpses of someone with his name on a clipboard, hearing it muttered by strangers. Once, I swear I saw a man who looked like the obituary photo, just older, tired, sitting at the same cafe I used to visit before the transplant. I blinked, and he was gone. I was unraveling. Physically, I was healing well. My blood pressure stabilized. My creatinine levels dropped. The doctors were thrilled. "You're a model recovery case," one of them said, like I should be proud. I nodded and smiled, said all the right things. But I stopped answering texts. I ignored Nate's calls. I ghosted my mom when she asked if I wanted to come over for dinner, because every moment I was alive felt like a theft. I didn't know Jacob Levin. I didn't know what kind of man he was. But I knew he had a wife, a daughter, people who waited and prayed for a phone call that never came. Meanwhile, I as some stranger got their miracle. And I couldn't stop wondering, what if that kidney was his last chance? What if someone had cut corners, gotten lazy, or simply didn't care enough to notice the mistake? What if I'd stolen a life? One night, I found myself in front of my bathroom mirror, shirtless. The scar from the surgery curved like a grim smile across my lower abdomen. I ran my fingers over it, trying to feel something: pain, pride, gratitude. Instead, I whispered aloud it wasn't mine. The words hung in the air like smoke. That same night, I sat down and wrote a letter. I didn't know where to send it or if I ever would, but I wrote it anyway. To the family of Jacob Levin, it began. I don't know how to say this or if I even have the right, but I think I have something that was meant for him. I wrote until my hand cramped, until my tears blurred the ink, until all I could do was sit there and breathe. Then I folded it up and placed it in the back of my desk drawer, beneath old tax forms and useless warranties. I didn't send it, because if I did, it would make it real. And I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. I didn't plan to go. I don't even know what I thought I'd find there. Closure? Forgiveness? Punishment? But 2 weeks after I wrote that letter and stuffed it into the drawer, I found myself typing Jacob Levin funeral into a search bar again, like some part of me needed confirmation that it all really happened. There it was, an archived obituary listing the funeral home. The burial had taken place 3 days after my surgery. Quiet. Family only. A line at the bottom said, "Visitors welcome at the cemetery between 9 and 6. So I went. I drove 2 hours north, heart-thudding the whole way. I didn't tell anyone. Just said I had a checkup. In truth, I hadn't slept the night before. I kept imagining scenarios. What if his wife saw me? What if I broke down in front of strangers? What if I couldn't even find the grave? But when I arrived, it was peaceful. A crisp fall day. Sunlight pushing through the gray. The cemetery was small, tucked behind an old stone church, dotted with leaves and quiet sorrow. I asked the groundskeeper where Jacob Levin was buried. He pointed without asking questions. Maybe he thought I was a friend. Maybe he didn't care. The headstone was simple. Jacob Elias Levin. Beloved husband, father, son. 1982 to 2023. Someone had placed fresh flowers in a copper vase. A single white lily. I stood there for a long time, hands in my coat pockets, watching the wind shuffle fallen leaves across the grass. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I was. A survivor? A thief? "I'm sorry," I finally whispered, as if the earth could hear me. "I think you were supposed to live. I think someone gave up on you too early. And I don't know why I got saved instead." No response, of course. Just the rustle of trees and the hum of far-off traffic. Then I heard voices. I turned and saw a woman and a little girl walking up the path. The woman, his wife, I knew it instantly, was carrying a bag, probably to tidy up the grave. The little girl had Jacob's eyes. I panicked. I ducked behind a tall row of hedges and watched them from a distance, stomach clenched. The girl crouched and placed something at the headstone. A drawing, maybe. The woman touched the stone and closed her eyes. I shouldn't have been there. This wasn't my moment. It never was. I waited until they left before I approached again. On the drawing was a heart with the words, "I love you, Daddy," scrawled in crayon. I turned and walked back to my car, lungs tight. As I started the engine, I realized something. Whatever the truth was, I was part of his story now. And he was part of mine. I never sent the letter. I never contacted his family, never marched into the hospital demanding a full investigation. Maybe that makes me a coward. Or maybe it makes me human, someone who survived something messy, something no one wanted to admit had happened. The official story is clean. I was next in line. A kidney became available. I got it. End of discussion. But I live with the unofficial story. The one written in the silences, in the paperwork that vanished, in the nurse's eyes that darted away from mine. I carry it like a second scar. For a while, I tried to ignore it. I threw myself into recovery. I followed every instruction, swallowed every pill, smiled at every "you look great." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living someone else's life. Until one day, I stopped trying to fight it. I stopped pretending this second chance came clean. And I started asking, what now? What does someone do when they're handed a life that wasn't meant for them? When they get the miracle that should have gone to someone else? I still don't have all the answers. Maybe I never will. But here's what I know. I volunteer now quietly behind the scenes for a donor advocacy group. I help families navigate the waiting lists, the paperwork, the impossible timelines. I don't tell them my story. I just listen. That's enough, I think. Every year, on the anniversary of my transplant, I drive back to that cemetery. I don't stay long. I leave a small stone on Jacob's grave. No flowers. Nothing dramatic. Just a gesture. Some people might think I'm trying to ease my guilt. Maybe they're right. But it's more than that. It's a promise. A promise that I won't waste what I was given, whether or not I was supposed to receive it. A promise that I'll remember him even if the world forgets. A promise that someone's name, once whispered in the dark corners of a hospital, won't be erased. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still wake up with the name Levin on my tongue. But I also wake up breathing, moving, alive. That's not something I take lightly. I carry him with me now. Not just in the kidney pulsing beneath my skin, but in the way I live. In the choices I make. In the silence I've learned to honor and the stories I've learned to listen to. This isn't just my life anymore. It never was. Thanks for watching. Take care. Subscribe and like the video.